Wait, so you did an immersive show at a wedding?
Guests were brought by shuttle to a movie ranch.
So they weren't prepped at all. Like the RSVP did not say like, and be prepared for an experience.
Their guests were all totally game, except for the few parents here and there that looked like,
Right.
what is,
The rogue
I'm all right, I'm
uncle
going
who's-
to play along, yeah.
Happy Friday, everybody. I'm Brendan Bradley with the Fifth Wall Forum, committed to bringing together industry insiders from the theater and technology worlds to create opportunities for new kinds of virtual performance. And today I'm having a conversation with Dasha Kittredge, a performer specializing in interactive storytelling and immersive performance, and the creative director of Meta for You. Today's conversation is brought to you by the Fifth Wall Forum Discord channel, a robust community of hundreds of technologists and artists sharing job postings, tutorials, upcoming performances, and the home of Artifact Friday, where our mentors and collaborators share artifacts from their work, giving Fifth Wall Forum members a first glimpse at the latest in innovation and immersive storytelling. Find out more at our website at fifthwallforum.com. That's 5THWALLFORUM.com. And now let's get to the conversation. Welcome, Dasha.
Hello, thank you so much.
I am so delighted to be talking with you because you are my first in real life performance back from the shutdown.
Ugh.
It's the first time I've gone to a show. I just went to Creep LA. Thank you for allowing me to come see it. And I had such a fun time. And I wanted to dive right in talking about this return because I know you in an entirely virtual context. And so I actually went through the show not totally knowing like who I was looking for, how tall you are, or even necessarily like what you look like in 3D human space. So, and then some people are performing in masks. So then I'm kind of like peering through the mask, like, is that her? I'm trying to take like context clues from your voice. So it was a delight and a special treat as an audience member to kind of be my first show back.
Yes,
So-
I'm glad we got to share it together. Similarly, this is my first performing live, in a real theatrical sense, back as well. So it has been a process that my brain really needed to get acclimated to seeing humans in front of me again and not terrifyingly just running away or yeah, it is a process, I think, for every actor that is a live performer, how they come back. And we got to do that together. Although, sorry, yes, it was very confusing that I was not only in a mask, but also a wig and all sorts of costuming that made me probably the most difficult person to parse out who I was.
I mean, can you walk through a bit of that journey of coming back to the show, kind of what the considerations were to returning and reopening, but also because the show Creep LA has such a legacy in LA already, but then moving beyond that, just kind of what this new process is like as a performer to reemerge and how you kind of rehearse or re-remember in that muscle memory kind of intimacy with your audience.
Yeah, it's after performing virtually in VR and, Zoom theater for a year and a half now, a lot of it is muscle memory that comes right back and you're like, oh, right, this detail that doesn't exist in virtual performance that only exists in live.
Like audio latency.
I know, yeah. Although like sound cues looping things and like, timing issues with immersive theater performances, there are audio issues that are just different.
Sure.
So I think that I really want to give props to JFI Productions, Justin and his team that really considered the actors' experience and coming back. The whole journey, they have been checking in with us and asking where we are, with our comfort level and anxieties about all of this, because we are very close to the audience, sometimes holding their hands and being like face to face. So I'm very thankful that vaccinations are required in order to be a guest in this show. I think that the cast is fully vaccinated as well. I think, it's kind of a touchy subject right now. And I'm personally really glad that JFI is kind of leading the way with saying like, no, we're going to require this and just try to keep everyone safe with every possible tool that we have. The rehearsal process was interesting because we all had to meet and get over that first hurdle of doing our read through together, in masks and stuff. And then the rehearsals were really broken up so that we weren't all overlapping together all the time. My first rehearsals were just with my director. So, everything was kind of separated out and in pods. And the show is kind of crafted in that way as well, where not everyone is mixing and breathing all over each other cast wise. It was designed to be a more safe production as well. So I think there were a lot of things they crafted into the show with COVID in mind, and wouldn't have been there if COVID wasn't still with us.
I think you also really embraced, in some ways, what some could see as a limitation as an opportunity, which to me is theater in a nutshell, is finding the way to make the limitations in some ways, the conceit or the style of the show. You had the audience put on customized masks as they entered. So they had these unique kind of faces. So each little pod that was going to go through the experience had a matching mask that made this kind of abstract smile or face, which then also allowed you internally to track which groups were together and who belonged where, which I just thought was so clever to kind of embrace what is kind of a stigmatized symbol of the times of like, I have to wear this thing, that then became this cue for both the show as well as a kind of standardization for our group to feel like we were this little pod and community.
Yeah, no, I think that was a smart move, and also helping everyone differentiate who was who. And because I think when the groups are collected to then go through the second step of the experience after the bar, it's a very helpful tool. So absolutely.
Yes. We had a rogue group try to join us, and they're like, "No, you're in the wrong group," which was
and
great.
we know why. Yeah. But I mean, it's also it's Halloween times, it's spooky season. So having a fun spooky mask is a lovely token to take away from the experience as well, and embrace it rather than say, oh, this is this annoying thing that we have to add, and think of it as only something negative.
Absolutely. And now you have merch. It's great. What I loved was how deconstructed the space was, or rather how like large and elevated it was. We crawled through walls. We went through all sorts of twists and turns, almost maze-like. People, obviously coming from different directions and really moving through space in a remarkable way. It felt endless. And I'd be curious how much of that is part of the rehearsal journey of kind of finding the narrative beats, and how much of it is mapped to this space, kind of like a traditional play. Like, this is our theater, the column is there, and we need to work around it, and you kind of build story around the venue.
This one is much more on rails than some other Creep LA shows. I think the space really dictates the experience with Immersive in general. So inherently, it just depends on kind of the timeline of how the build goes, and in relation to the rehearsal process. There are some shows, immersive theater shows, where we are walking around doing rehearsals with tape on the floor, and we have no idea that there's actually a really low ceiling, and we've been rehearsing with these large gestures above our head, and then they build the ceiling, and we can't do any of that anymore, and we have to adapt and change things. This time around, the build was started earlier, and so a lot of it was already there when we started rehearsals, which was, I think, it's lovely when that gets to happen, because then you can craft moments specifically, like, oh, look at this weird object. I'm going to, it gives you ideas when the space is closer to finished when you're rehearsing in it. So it just depends. I mean, immersive actors, I think, are inherently very adaptable, arguably more adaptable than a person that only does film or TV or certain kinds of specific other kinds of theater. So it's a flexible answer to that question.
A flexible answer for a flexible medium. Being flexible, you, for example, are often overseeing a lot of the build, not just as a performer, but also as a creative director for Meta for You, bringing kind of marketing activations to life. Can you talk about that experience of how you've overseen bringing these shows to all sorts of unique environments, whether for a brand activation somewhere or, a specific show?
Yeah. The Meta for You projects that I've been part of have, since the inception of the company, it's been such a joy to create little Westworld-esque worlds and experiences that can extraordinarily boost someone's party or event or marketing activation. The people that have never experienced it, when you sprinkle it into their experience, they're like, oh, well, how can we go back? I mean, this really elevated it. So doing things like real weddings and having this one time ever that this event is ever going to take place and we've crafted an immersive world around this real wedding with the real audience that, well, audience guests. All these words start.
Wait, so you did an immersive show at a wedding?
So one of Meta4U's first contracts was doing a wedding where the guests were brought by shuttle to a movie ranch where then there were actors that were you were in this sudden like mid-century surreal world where these Stepford wife-esque women were kind of and you had to figure out where the bride and groom were. Like everyone was like, oh, we haven't seen them forever, we think that they were scientists and they got maybe lost and they were building a time machine and this and that and da da da, and everyone's like really weird and confusing, and then there's an FBI agent that's like pulling people into a corner and trying to he looks like a tie salesman but he's actually working for the FBI. Like it was a whole immersive theater piece that was just prepared for that one day for the real wedding, and the guests were many of them had no idea what they were like. What Wow,
So they weren't prepped at all. Like the RSVP did not say like, and be prepared for an experience. Like they showed up to a wedding and instead ended up on this ranch. Uh-huh. Right, right. Nice.
that initial approach you have to kind of spoon feed before you start really delivering, and that is based off a lot of body language, eye contact, and how the person, if they are confused what is real, you need to kind of help clarify that we are in an imaginary world and maybe do things in a slightly more heightened way, not so kind of confusingly meta.
Right.
um, so that was a really great way to start these kinds of projects, and with marketing activations the clients can maybe have a little less imagination faith in terms of adding these kinds of components or confusing your audience this way or that way. They want to have a lot of control over their IP and how it's presented, and so obviously there's more restrictions when you're doing a marketing activation for Amazon Prime, the show Hunters that we did, where we had a cast of 40 that were bringing a grindhouse theater to life, and it suddenly we're stepping into the 70s. So wide range of clients and their preferences, but I think we really enjoy kind of curating things for the client. Like however much they've developed, we're not going to say, okay, no, we're not going to use any of that, we want this. we
Right.
we want to curate what that vision is, and then if they don't have enough ideas, we love creating content for them too.
One of the things that this ties into is also the work that you've done virtually, which I've been privileged enough to work a little bit alongside you in with things like Onboard. But there are these multiple tiers of audience ranging from people who are totally gaming down to people who are completely confused to then people who even want to maybe like break the experience or kind of see how far it goes. Can you talk about what it's like to design, either with a client or even in your personal work, a kind of multi-tiered audience approach?
Yeah, it really varies with who the audience is, and it can be tricky. Yeah, you don't know. Typically, I'd say, in live immersive installations, the people are not trying to break the world as much as they are in virtual
Interesting.
worlds. Just because there's a real set, and if there's usually a camera or something around that's like if they break something or if they're rude or push the actor that is performing for them, it feels like a boundary that they don't typically cross unless they're super drunk or something, which
Right.
does happen in
Sure.
immersive shows where people just show up and they are plastered for
Uh-huh.
I had to guide someone through a delusion show once that was clearly tripping on something, who thought she had magical powers and was running around the space and had to be wrangled like a crazy bat. So those things can happen, but they're more rare. I think in the VR work, is where you see a lot of the I'm trying to break this space to understand where the walls are. Performing for the Underpresents was, I think, the biggest version of that I had ever encountered, where people were just trying to kill my avatar as soon as they met me, because they, first of all, sometimes didn't know I was a real actor.
Huh.
They thought I was a pre-recorded NPC, kind of just in the game on loop or something. And so they were trying to it was part of their troubleshooting of trying to figure out, wait, is this actually a human being that's responding to what I'm doing right now? And so I didn't kind of get mad. And my character was typically either a extremely bossy Russian dance instructor or a really vulnerable cat who is just, why are you hitting me? Stop. Ow, my whiskers. So I had easy ways to immediately respond to that and also make it clear, no, I don't want to be killed. I don't think it ties in so much to the marketing campaigns, because those are pretty well structured so that it's very clear what they're entering into. And I think they don't want to have surprise moments and people feel like they were duped into something. Whereas with immersive theater or with VR, I think that playfulness of tricking the audience is part of the design a lot of the time. And in experimental theater, I think it's something that we like to play around a lot with. And it's very fun to confuse your audience in a moment of wonder or expansion in what is this story? What is this space? And have that moment of confusion be an awesome moment.
It almost sounds like the fourth wall is really more of an onion. It's more layers that you can peel back versus how much you want the audience to formally understand and engage with the experience of how much are they in on it versus how much are they discovering it versus how much are they meant to just sit in the dark theater with their popcorn and observe it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea of the fourth wall as an onion, as a curved onion where you're like, is this even a wall? What's going on here?
I mean, I feel like The Underpresents is a great example of something that accidentally found its audience.
Yeah, I think The Underpresents surprised many of us actors, but also the creators and directors. Samantha Gorman, I don't think, she never planned for us to have a year-long overarching storyline to our characters that we developed. That was not in the plan.
What was the original plan? Was it like a month, or was it a show, or what was the...
I think our original contract was just for 3 to 4 months. And, we were supposed to be supporting Time Boat, which was the single player campaign. And, you can still go in and play that start to finish because that is all pre-recorded. And we were kind of sprinkled in to have this moment of confusion for the audience of, wait, is this another pre-recorded thing? Or, oh, wait, this is live, and have this kind of magical liveness to the world.
So wait, you were the Comic-Con activation for the show, the actual pre-recorded show, and then it just actually ended up taking over and becoming like a live-in installation?
I mean, that's kind of a good analogy for it, but in a sense,
that's nuts.
Kind of, yeah. But it's also because we didn't expect, I don't think anyone expected us having such diehard return fans that they got a taste of the live actors and their wants and hopes and dreams, and they would come back the next day, and then you'd see that player again, and you couldn't just pretend you hadn't met them when they are trying to communicate to you that they know you and that they're already friends with you, your character. And so it would just have been a disservice to all of the audiences if we had just pretended like we had never met them before and just redone our first shtick that we, or kind of sequence that we had prepared.
Right.
So part of it was kind of like, I think I started adding more storyline because of a particular player, and he was there every single day. And I was one of the actors that had the most shifts in the under, so I was there every single weekday for hours in headset, in character, roaming around the desert there.
What does that look like? When we talk about the most number of hours, is that 5 hours? Is that 50 hours? What is the kind of general commitment to being a part of an experience like that?
I think this is still being figured out.
Sure.
because there aren't so many experiences where an actor has to be in headset for long hours performing. I think typically these things happen at, festivals, and then there may be a run, but it doesn't necessarily go on for months and months and months.
Right.
And typically it might be a show that's about an hour long. Headset fatigue starts to come in after an hour and a half, 2 hours. So we would have 4 hour shifts. We would be taking, breaks each hour to be able to not have so much headset fatigue.
So it's kind of like working at a theme park and you're wearing the suit and you've got to go cool off on a rotation with the other
Hmm.
performers.
Yeah, and there's no standard for this at this point, and I think as performers, I think it's important to voice when things start to hurt or not be as comfortable anymore, or this is the first time that actors are being asked to do things like this with headsets for long periods of time. So I think while it may be uncomfortable to go to your boss and say, I have a major headache. My eyes are strained, I think, from I shouldn't have taken up that second shift, and that's on the actor too. Like, I was just so excited to be doing this work, and it was giving my soul
Right.
so much with how the audience was acting and how I was playing with them and creating this story together. It was essentially like a, year-long RPG kind of ARG VR. It was just like so many things that I loved put in one piece together. So I would just pick up shifts whenever I could. And so some days I would have 8 hours because I was like, I can do that.
Wow.
And then after that day, I would be like, uh, I need to maybe make choices that are better for my skull and
Right.
my shoulders rather than just the passion of wanting to perform and go back into this world that truly became as addictive to me as it did to some of the players. I mean, I miss the under, I miss my characters. I think the people that got really sucked into that world, we all got really attached. I have friends that are players that I don't know who they are. I know, what their random kind of username was in the moment, but that has nothing to do with who they are. And because the audience in the under could not speak, which I think was a genius move on Tender Claw's part, to take away the voice, because it took away so much of the awkwardness when player to player
Hmm.
in the multiplayer world. Like if someone is 13 years old and another player is in their 60s, they would never know, and there was never any, they just a soul, a sprite, a spirit is meeting another
Hmm.
sprite,
Right.
and it's just by gestures and the way that they're moving their hands around and trying to kind of charades their way through a conversation that they would become friends with each other. And I think that if the voice was present, that wouldn't have happened.
Oh, I agree, especially when we look at like other platforms like VR chat, when people can kind of troll each other,
Yeah.
then the toxicity is just too easy. And really what I've seen that do is it's not that like, oh, everybody just comes an asshole on the internet. It's the idea that like it only takes one asshole in the room for the experience to be ruined for everybody. And so what's so
Yeah.
great is by like just depriving people of that ability to disrupt. And it forces then your audience to be more creative, which in some ways self-selects only people that are really there for the creative, or there to approach the world in a new way and to connect in a nonverbal way.
Yeah, it levels the playing field. And yeah, it was great that, audience members were proposing to some of our characters, and we didn't know if it was a man or a woman.
Right.
There were some times when later I was told, like, oh, that was my 8-year-old son. Someone would send me a message and I'd be like, oh, okay, so I was doing that performance for an 8-year-old. Cool. But the Discord is really, I think, the reason that all of that community building happened.
Yeah.
The fans of
Wow.
the experience of the VR app themselves created, I'm not sure who set up the Discord originally, but the fans super quickly kind of found each other because they would have these experiences with an actor and they would want to share what had happened with other people, or they were trying to find someone that they had met in the experience where they felt like they had a really wonderful like walk and kind of like magical journey with a player, and they had no idea who that player was and they wanted to find them, so they would try to find each other as players too. And so that started this really tight-knit core community that then just started growing and growing and growing. And then they started dropping links in there of their own video recordings of what they had experienced with live actors to share with each other, because these live actor interactions were somewhat rare because you didn't know when they were going to happen. And I think Tender Claws also realized that people were really loving that live actor component. And so they added something called Variety Hour, where you knew that there were going to be live actors between this hour and that hour. So that, I think, was a really lovely way that Tender Claws was also adapting their experience to what they felt their audience was interested in and looking for, and giving them more of that. I mean, that's rare that a company carves out more of their money and time and energy to do exactly what the fan base is interested in that moment. That's really special. That doesn't happen often.
Absolutely. Well, and that's brilliant user testing of taking the feedback and going, all right, let's go with it. I'd be so curious. You keep referencing how much time you were in there. How many hours do you think you have performed at this point in VR?
Oh wow. It's over 1,000 for sure. I just don't know how many thousands
Of
at
course.
this point.
So it's thousands, plural.
I mean, I'm so curious. I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna tally this up because I have my schedule for that whole year.
Oh, that's true.
But that plus then the Tempest runs that we did.
And then the workshops you've done and onboard and
yeah, it's a lot. I mean, one to two to who knows 1,000, I'd say, ballpark.
And when did you hit like a change, right? Like I feel like with choreography, for example, like I can pick it up pretty quickly, but it's not really in my body until a certain number of passes or a certain number of hours that I've done the routine.
Yeah.
When did you feel like the system became an extension of you rather than confining you?
I think it really depends on each app or platform that you're using, because I felt really proficient in Tender Claus's The Underpresents app after about a few weeks of performing in there. Like maybe after a week or two, I felt very comfortable. I knew the extensions of the avatars, just how much I would have to tilt my head to make the tail of my cat go up a little bit, or that I can't go down and crunch too far close to the ground because my avatar starts glitching a little bit. You have to learn each avatar just like it is a costume. So I don't think that it's kind of like a one-stop shop in terms of skill proficiency. I think you have to kind of start from square one with each platform, because each platform has different kinds of avatars and how they are, how the bones work and,
Right.
and how the motion capture is
Translated
is working for. Yeah, so you have to kind of be a little bit more, kind of humble with the getting back to square one mindset in terms of really being detail oriented when you begin a new project, I think, instead of assuming that one style of motion is going to fit a different avatar.
Speaking of like learning these systems and kind of starting over from square one, you and I both went to NYU and trained at studios there, a kind of more classical approach to theater training. And then we've actually talked about you teaching my lab at NYU to kind of help people bake more into curriculum how someone might approach these systems. What do you think that process is for a more classically trained or traditional actor to start bringing some of this into their work and to start kind of pivoting into these new systems?
Yeah, I mean, it's not every actor that wants to put a headset on for 4 hours and perform for
What
people.
do you mean?
No, I mean, we in our small circle are dying to do more of this stuff all the time, but it's a lot of actors, they want to be on a TV show, or they just have other goals and aspirations for the reason that they went into performing. Personally, I had this very kind of smorgasbordy training where first I was a classical ballet dancer with Ithaca Ballet. Then I went to a performing arts high school where I thought I was going to go into musical theater because of my dance background and my love of singing. And then I did a Circle in the Square program, a summer program in New York City. And I was like, oh, I really love the intense scene study that we did there. And I felt finally like grounded and alive, and maybe I want to not be doing musicals my whole life. And then going to NYU kind of also solidified that in the Meisner program. And at NYU, suddenly I was doing mask work, which I fell in love with. And I was kind of taken away by this idea of putting on a mask that transforms and forces your body to adapt and change. So doing Commedia dell'arte mask at NYU, doing Balinesian mask with Per Bra, who was incredible. I don't know if he's still teaching, but anyone who ever wants to take a Balinesian mask class should try to find him. And neutral mask to really kind of get the basics down of just how the slightest head tilt can change your whole character's demeanor with a mask that doesn't even have an expression. So that, I think, was kind of a prerequisite, plus some experimental theater stuff that kind of primed me for this interest of pushing the boundaries of theater, or immersive theater, and entering and being interested in auditioning for something like that. And then Delusion, when I got out to Los Angeles, was my first immersive theater production. But I mean, I didn't know what I was getting into. And only now looking back do I realize the reason I was interested in that was tied back to all these kind of different components of, like, it had so much more physicality work that was tying back to my dance love, and had this vocal flowery and kind of, you have to take up, your voice has to take up the space, and you have to capture your audience's attention because they're right in front of you and you're looking into their eyes, tying into that experimental theater work that I did at Viewpoints with Mary Overly, and crossing that fourth wall, and the excitement of that, and the confusion of that sometimes for your audience. I was really somehow interested in confusion, but that confusion, excitement, what is going on here? This isn't normal. This is something more than normal in this theatrical sense. So, yeah, I mean, I think and also improv, I did UCB improv, and I really hated it. I hated no offense to UCB. I mean, they have an excellent training program, but I hated the pressure to be funny. And I love improv around the story and the character and the audience. So taking away that pressure to be funny and having improv in immersive theater, I was getting that, like, all the things I loved from improv and none of the stuff that I hated, because Delusion was extremely dramatic. People are dying. I mean, in the story, you're trying to save, it's very, very dramatic. I was like sobbing tears and looking and asking the audience for help, and it felt so real, and it didn't have this pressure of like, oh, you have to make everyone laugh. Yeah, I wish there was more like dramatic improv training out there, because I don't think there's.
Well, you're describing like Carol Churchill and Mike Lee, right? Like this kind of foundation.
I guess I wish I had known about that because I would have been really excited.
We don't teach it. You're right.
Yeah.
Speaking of kind of like this eclectic approach and wanting to take on these more tools and be aware of these more tools, what do you feel is something that you're missing, or that next tool or resource or training that you're looking for to bring to your work? We like to kind of signal boost on this podcast and kind of reach out to the community. What is a collaborator or a technique or something you're missing in your process right now?
Yeah, I think there are very few amazing actors that have a lot of tech knowledge or computer tech know-how. I was a very avoider of tech kind of person. I was not a computer geek at all. Like, I just learned only a few years ago how to set up a Google meeting. It's just things that I would just defer to someone else who I assumed had more knowledge instead of trying to learn myself. I think as artists, we sometimes, say, oh no, these are I'm very good at this and I'm very good at this.
Absolutely.
But I'm not necessarily I'm not that person. Instead of saying, well, I'll try to set it up and then I'll ask you if I need help.
Do you think any of that is baked into our industry? Has such a shame for what you are or are not, or what you're an expert at versus what you don't know? Like casting notices are so much like must be a this, or must be proficient in this, or your special skills on your resume. They're always like, don't put something on there you really don't know how to do. Like, we don't encourage a sense of a performer can be learning or trying something new, that they kind of are or they are not. They're proficient or they are not. Do you think that that hurts us as well?
I totally agree. I mean, I think there is some sort of semi-shame in being a multi-hyphenate because it somehow means might make someone assume that you're not a
Yes.
professional if you do a
Yes.
bunch of other things. So I have had a bit of a hesitation sometimes to say that I'm also I had a side career of being a professional makeup artist for years. I've done Elijah Wood's makeup. I've done Joe Biden's makeup. I never talk about that when I'm in an acting setting because yeah, there's a fear and it kind of sucks. And I'm trying to get over that fear because I think there is no shame in being a multi-hyphenate. You have more to bring to the
No.
table. And, if someone judges you for that, then maybe they're not a very good boss, you know? You know,
Yeah.
things to think
Yeah.
about. I mean, I was a brand model for years when I first graduated to help pay the bills. And now it really enhances my experience of managing other actors and training them, casting them for these immersive marketing activations and creative directing. So, all of this experience it's even the waitressing I did is such good training for customer service, which you
Sure.
end up being if you're an immersive performer.
Yes.
Because if things break down and you're stuck with your audience for 30 minutes while they're trying to fix the show, you need to be able to be a good customer service person within
Yeah.
character. I mean, it's a multi-hyphenate kind of niche entertainment space. So having all that experience is for a long time I kind of didn't talk about that pocket or this pocket, but the more I do, I think it's okay to say you know how to do and are a professional in more than one thing.
Yeah.
And
Cargo pants are awesome. Creative cargo pants. I've got pockets everywhere.
that's right. Yeah. I mean, finding multiple things you're passionate about also helps you as an artist support yourself when you're first starting and having to
Yes.
make enough money to make ends meet. And I think it's so helpful to try to find supportive jobs that at least have some piece of that passion of yours for whatever artistic endeavor you are striving towards. That's why I quit restaurant work because I felt like it was while I was getting a lot of kind of one-on-one customer service experience, which I'm now thankful for, it did feel like a 90-degree move away with my
Mm-hmm.
time of what I wanted to be focusing on. So then when I made an ultimatum for myself and said, no, I'm going to quit that and I'm going to do all of the other things that I know how to do, brand modeling, makeup design. Those were my two kind of backup things to performing. And it totally worked. And I got so much more experience on set because I was hustling in terms of the makeup back then. And I got to know a lot more about filmmaking, light design because of being on a
Right.
crew. So if something is sucking your soul away and you're upset and you hate that job, it is so empowering to cut it out of your life and find something else. There's so many different kinds of jobs that can support an artistic career. Time is so short and you have this one life, and it would be really a shame if a big chunk of your life was kind of having a negative, I wish I could be having a better feeling with my work. So make those choices. They're hard and they're scary, but it's so worth it.
If someone is taking that to heart and is really inspired by that and wants to follow the adventure of someone who is practicing what they preach, where does someone follow you, contact you, know about the cool stuff that you're doing?
I think direct contact is always the best. I will always look at
You can go to Creep LA and look in her eyes from 3 feet away. And
no, but if you do want to reach out, my email is dashaforyoU.com. And I'm on Instagram at Dasha Kittredge. Um, Last name is a ridiculous Kittredge, which is always spelled wrong. But I'm very open to meeting people, and I would love to come see your show if you're making something similar too.
well, thanks for being open to having this conversation with me today.
Oh, this has been such a fun journey down multiple memory lanes.
Thanks so much to Dasha Kittredge for the conversation. If you want to join me on the show, find me online at the handle Brendan A. Bradley or go to fifthwallforum.com to find out more. I'm Brendan Bradley wishing you a happy Friday, and I'll see you next time.